Yes. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So welcome back for the session 10 by Dr. Ambhi Ganesan. Dr. Ambhi Ganesan is an associate partner at IBM, bringing a unique blend of technical expertise and strategic insight to digital transformation. With a multidisciplinary background spanning biotechnology, biomedical engineering, and advanced analytics, he leverages deep technical knowledge in data, AI, and machine learning on hybrid cloud platforms. As a strategy consultant with cross-functional experience in sales, operations, finance, and customer care, Dr. Ganesan specializes in driving AI and analytics solutions that enhance customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. His academic foundation from IIT Madras and Johns Hopkins University, combined with his professional acumen, position him as a trusted advisor helping enterprises navigate complex digital landscapes. Currently focused on AI and analytics application and customer care, Dr. Ganesan is particularly passionate about driving innovation in healthcare and life sciences sectors. Dr. Ambhi, the session is yours. You can start.
Thanks, Navin. All kind words.
Yeah.
All AI, chat GPT helps
AI is helping you. AI is going so gentle words to help you.
All right. Thank you for the invitation to this program, this session. Really glad that I'm able to contribute and participate in this. I like to keep it free flowing, so at any point in time, feel free to stop and ask. That's totally fine. Let me bring up my screen here. So the way I'm structuring this is we'll talk about a few things. I'll start by talking about the changes that we are seeing in the industry as a whole. I'm sure you've all been experiencing this and seeing this firsthand. We'll talk a little bit about how AI and automation has been evolving in the enterprises, in the industry. And then from there, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we are applying AI and automation for customer service, how we're doing this for marketing, how all of this is helping sales and servicing and ensuring that the customers are satisfied. The trends that we are seeing is this, right? If you look at the last 30 years in the IT industry, there were a few major seismic changes that happened. Late 90s, it was the onset of the internet, the dot-com era, and close on its heels was globalization, almost as an outcome of that, if not enabled by that tremendously, right? And globalization meant there was humongous change in how enterprises operated, moving some of the services offshore or setting up data centers in different locations, things of that nature. And then the 2010s, again, we saw a big explosion through onset of cloud. So it was migrating everything to cloud and modernizing everything, making it cloud ready, making things that are social and mobile ready for consumers to consume. And then this decade, if you look at it with the generative AI onset, we are again, we're on the cusp of this, and we're starting to see a huge exponential change in how enterprises are operating. And it's very clear, a few years down the lane, the magnitude of changes that enterprises are going to see and how they are going to operate as an outcome of the advances in generative AI. The spate of advances just keeps coming on and on every single day, right? And it's fascinating to see how that's evolving over time. So let me keep going here. A little bit of history. I won't go too deep here. If you look at automation and AI in the past, AI specifically in the past, till maybe the early 2000s, we were in a pre-machine learning era. Yes, we used to do a little bit of machine learning, largely, statistical models. And then there are a few advances that happened in the late 2000s with the onset of GPUs, where machine learning basically became deep learning, and that took off on a huge basis. But you still had some constraints on the compute capacity, right? So you could build all these big models, you could build these huge neural networks that could go and read images, apply it for computer vision. You could build these huge neural networks that could go process a stream of text or process a stream of audio. And all of that was great, but still, operating those at scale and in a consumer ready fashion was a little bit challenging because the compute capacity was constrained. And late 2010s, there were a few advances in terms of the neural architecture, as well as how the GPU compute capacity itself was playing out. And so both of those led to this explosion of the generative AI phenomenon that we are seeing today, right? Couple of years back is when ChatGPT exploded onto the scene, and that sort of became the inflection point. But truly, that started back in 2017 when the neural network architecture, the transformer architecture was discovered, and that laid the foundation for all of these advances. So AI has been consistently evolving. We used to do small statistical ML models, and then we came to the deep learning models for unlocking beyond just structured data and looking at unstructured data in a big fashion. And then with Gen AI, with the transformers and foundation models, now we are taking it to a whole another level, being able to use these large language models or multimodal models to be able to do a variety of different tasks and automate. And it's something that we are seeing across the enterprises. So multiple organizations have gone and interviewed enterprises. Um, McKinsey has looked at some of the enterprises. Gartner is an analyst who's looked at enterprises. IBM has its own research wing called Institute for Business Value, and the consistent theme across all of these analysts and organizations is that when we go and interview enterprises as a whole, hundreds, thousands of enterprises, there is a clear sentiment that this is a transformative technology that is going to uplift revenue, that's going to A, serve customers very differently, and B, change the way the enterprises themselves function and operate across all the different functions. Yes, it's across all different functions, but you'll see, the way enterprises are prioritizing and saying, okay, this is the area where I start. A majority of them start with customer service. That is by and large the low hanging fruit where they see the massive potential to start with. So from there, right? So we talked about machine learning, deep learning, generative AI. But if you translate this to enterprise setting, different from a consumer setting. Sorry, was that a question? Okay. So in a consumer setting, the way foundation models are being leveraged or how you're going to be using generative AI is fairly different from how you'd use it in an enterprise setting. As a consumer of an application, if I'm on my phone and I'm walking somewhere and I need to, I see a sign that's in a different language and I want that to be translated in real time and I want to understand what it is, then I'm going to point my phone at it. It's going to I'm going to point my camera at it. It's going to have a model in the back end that's capturing the image and processing it, doing an OCR, then translating, extracting the text, translating it, and then giving me the appropriate language. And if I ask a question of it, okay, should I be doing X versus Y? Then it's going to respond to that. That is a consumer-based flow. In an enterprise, it's very, very different. You'll see a lot of back office functions and front office functions where we would have these really complex workflows, right? And sometimes I um, I playfully um, juxtapose them with Rube Goldberg machines. If anyone's unfamiliar with Rube Goldberg machine, it's something like this, right? You would have seen these in cartoons and satirical pieces elsewhere. Really complex things to achieve an end goal, right? You've cobbled together 10 different sequences of steps in order to get to a goal here. Here, the goal is to, water a plant, but the way you're doing it is, you're setting up a pulley mechanism here, you're setting up another pulley mechanism here, you're sending a couple of balls, and then you're doing a bunch of things in order to water it instead of directly watering it. And some of these are not necessarily because, you want to do it, but the parallel here is in the enterprises that there are constraints. There are certain data sources that you can't access directly. There are certain APIs that may not have been built, but you still need to achieve the goal. Therefore, you need to bypass and do something else. And so there are all these complex workflows. Now, how do you get to these complex workflows through generative AI? Having a chatbot that answers questions is great. You ask questions about current events, or you're asking a question about a recipe, and I'm giving you responses to that. Fantastic. But in an enterprise setting, very, very different. You want a customer order to be processed, or you want an invoice to be processed, and you want to tell a customer what happened to their invoice. Seems very simplistic, but can be very, very, very complex in the back end. You have to go take a look at who the customer is, what organization they belong to, where do they map within an internal grouping of customers. And for each different grouping of customers, you may have a different database. Then which database should I go look at, or which API should I go look at? When did they make the purchase? And there may be additional regulatory requirements that you have to comply with. And so all of these will lead to 10, 20 different steps in a workflow that you have to navigate. So how do you do that, right? And so that's where the industry as a whole is moving toward the concept of agents. And I'm sure you've heard this and you'll continue to hear this a lot more. 2025 is likely going to be the age of agents, the year of agents. Um, and so what exactly does that mean in a realistic fashion, right? All these complex workflows that I talked about previously, way previously, it would have been largely fully manual. You have, this person interfacing with this person is going and looking at 10 different systems, or, someone else is going and checking against a post, going and pulling up a report, etc. A lot of processes involved. And then 15, 20 years ago, we started getting into the concept of RPA, robotic process automation, which is we said, okay, you know what? A lot of these processes, for the most part, are fairly deterministic, meaning you can break it down piece by piece, block by block, and make it almost set of conditional statements and say, you start with this step. If you do this, then go do this. If it is not true, then you go do this, etc. Right? So you almost can build a pseudocode pattern of what that logic needs to look like, what the process needs to look like. And so we got onto this whole automation piece saying, okay, I can take any process that happens in an enterprise and we can break it down piece by piece, map it. And there are numerous platforms that have come onto the scene that can do exactly that. The challenge with that is it's fairly rigid. And so if for whatever reason, the company, the enterprise has to make a change, then make a change in the process, then you're stuck. You have to go and rewire that whole process all over again. So it becomes fairly brittle and becomes rigid. So yes, it can do, if you determine this is the step and it's not going to change forever, then fantastic. But if it's going to change and if it's going to evolve, then you're stuck with a fairly brittle system. And so that's where the promise of LLM agents are emerging, which is we're now saying these LLMs can, with sufficient training, take a look at all these complex processes and start to come up with a plan of how to run this process. And so, given sufficient information about everything, about the landscape of the customers, the databases, the APIs, the rules that have to be followed, etc. The theoretical understanding, at least, that given all of this information, the LLM should be able to go and chart out a plan like this and go and execute the plan by itself. And the way it does it is, you'd have seen over the last couple of days, there has been a lot of talk about quote unquote reasoning models, right? So these are models that are internally having a chain of thought. You give a query and it says, here's how I'm going to solve an open-ended problem. And it goes and lays out neatly 10 different steps on how to solve an open-ended problem. And now we go and set it up with the ability to call a different API or a database or a different system, an RPA bot, whatever it is. These all become quote unquote tools. Then it can go and call those tools in order to execute it, right? So that is an emerging area. It's not fully solved, but it's an emerging area which there is a fairly good amount of promise that in 2025 will hit a phase where this is performing robustly enough for the enterprise. And so you're able to plan for all these complex goals without any deterministic or directed instructions. And so if for whatever reason the rules change or the process change, the system adapts, right? It's not building the same plan every single time. And so that's the promise, and that's where we are headed as an industry. And so that's what you see here, right? So we've gone from purely using applications that were calling an API, calling an RPA bot, to building these agents that can create and update a plan, call a bunch of tools to execute it. And finally, this is the holy grail. We are moving towards what we call as multi-agent orchestration, which is these autonomous or semi-autonomous agents are talking to each other. One makes a plan, one is for doing a particular task, the other for doing a specific other task. And these agents can coordinate amongst themselves to carry out a fairly complex plan. That's the area where we are going to. So now if you take all of those approaches, right, that was purely from a technical perspective. If you take all of those approaches and then say, where do we apply all of this? Within an enterprise, uh, we've seen a lot of these already happen. So these foundation models, these large language models, can impact a variety of different areas, right? So we talked about the automation side of it, the business automation side of things. You have back office workflows that need to be automated. Um, you can do this in customer servicing, like we talked about. If you think about a customer servicing operation, a very simple query from a customer could be, where is my order? Or, what's my order status? Things like that. At the fairly complex end of the spectrum, they could be asking questions on, okay, I need to make a return for this particular product that I purchased day before yesterday. And oh, by the way, I have a credit that's remaining. So there could be 10 different conditions that happen. How do you leverage AI and automation to handle those queries from the customers? And you're not just parroting what they're saying, but in the back end, figuring out how to solve the problem, go solve the problem, fetch the right data, present the right information to the client. And on top of that, you're not just presenting information. If something needs to be done, if an action needs to be performed, like you need to go and credit some more for a return, or you need to initiate a return for a product, then how do you go do those actions? How do you go perform those actions on behalf of the customer? So that's an emerging area that a lot of enterprises are investing in, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The other area is on IT development itself. So again, you may have heard about, you know, these models being able to generate code, and as a function of being able to generate code, being able to augment what software developers and software engineers are doing on a day in and day out basis. So think of these as assistants, agents that are sitting in your IDE where you're developing the code, and as you're developing the code, your your agent is providing instructions or helping you complete the code, analyze the code, um, explain the code, all of that in a neatly packaged manner. So your productivity to developing the code goes up. Um, we're seeing this also happen in few areas that are not heavily talked about, I would say, right? Sustainability, being able to, if you think about sustainability, that is a big area where every single enterprise has made commits on how to optimize greenhouse gas emissions or to comply with ESG policies that multiple different agencies across the globe have instituted. So there is a constant need for reporting to these agencies, these global agencies, as to how that enterprise, how that company is performing across all of those different metrics. And the number of metrics itself can be fairly staggering that that you're required to report against or that you're willing to report against. And so for all of those, you have to go look at an array of different data sources, compile them, and then create a report, so to speak. And we are seeing LLM starting to do some of that. Cybersecurity, um, or in general, info security as a whole. Um, whether you depend looking at the network configurations that you have, looking at the firewall configurations that you have, or being able to recommend if an infosec policy, if an application is complying with an infosec policy rules and so on and so forth. That's an emerging area as well. And then a lot of focus goes into what we call as physical asset management, meaning on the shop floor, on the industry manufacturing floor, you have billions of data points streaming on a continuous basis from your sensors and IoT data. Largely, we've leveraged structured data. All that structured data has been piped into structured machine learning models, and that helps you with predictive maintenance, operational efficiencies, etc. Now we're starting to tack on generative AI and LLMs on top of that as a UX layer or a reporting layer. Once you have these machine learning models do all of this, then can you query the results against it? Can you quote unquote reason against it and then help the users in a natural language manner? And we see something similar on the R&D side. Again, if you looked at the Nobel Prize awardees last year for chemistry, um, AlphaFold was a big monumental task that came out directly as a breakthrough from the transformer neural net architecture. And as a result of that, now the industry has advanced to a stage where you're able to go and predict protein structures to a fairly precise level that was not heard of or that was not seen of before. Previously, it would have taken fairly long cycles to take a protein sequence to a structure and a viable validated structure that would have involved thousands of experiments and simulations on what combination of reagents you need to be adding, which one is going to give you the crystallized form, and then you take the crystallized form and then see what the structure is. Right now, all of that is getting sped up and accelerated because now you have a short-circuited way to go on protein structure prediction from sequence to tertiary structure to a fairly reliable mechanism. And so across the board, we're seeing enterprises use these. And so if you look at some of these as a double click, in when we look at generative AI as a whole, there is broadly 3, 4 buckets of capabilities that you'll see. Capability number one, and this is by far the most seen or most heard of, or everyone starts on this, is summarization, right? You have a volume of unstructured documents, you have textual documents, it's hard to read through. You have standard operating procedures that customer service agents use, or you have research articles, or you have financial reports, analyst articles, whatever it is. Rather than someone going and manually reading through all of those and then coming up with the summarized points, now you can use an LLM to go and summarize across those and come up with a set of summarized points. So that's one broad bucket of capability. The second broad bucket of capabilities is what I would call conversational knowledge, which is, think of these as the virtual assistants or chatbots, but on a whole different level. Now you're doing this in combination with some of the NLP tasks that that would be required to address these, right? So you're using these foundation models to not just create a series of tokens in order to respond to the customer or the user, but you can use this existing same LLM um, to extract entities. Say someone is looking for you can configure the system to say, okay, I want to be able to capture all the product names and that they're talking about. It could be a stream of text that the user is typing, but we'll still be able to go identify, okay, here's the shoe brand that they talked about. Here is a watch brand that they talked about, whatever it is, right? So you're configuring those prompts and you're able to automatically identify and configure into a backend system. So you're extracting entities, you're summarizing it. You can take all of that unstructured information and make it structured for use by downstream systems. So that's all on the abstraction piece, which is you're extracting some information from a series of text that is coming in. The flip side to that is creation, where you're generating net new content. And of course, this started with the text generation, but by no means limited to that. Image generation models have grown tremendously over the last 2-3 years. Video models are catching up as well. There is a lot of promise in models that are able to take a blurb of text and then convert it into a video of a video clip of a few seconds to less than a minute. At scale over next few years, we expect that pipeline to become very, very robust, where you'll be able to create all modalities, whether it's text or audio, image, video, all of those robustly at scale and in a consistent basis. So we're still in early days. We do, the industry does text generation very, very robustly, but early days for video models and so on. And then, the final one is code creation. Code, again, is a form of text, but here the idea is to be able to augment developer capacity, like we talked about. So now if you take all of these and then say, okay, where am I going to apply within an enterprise? Several different areas, right? Like we talked about in the previous slide. Big ones that typically come up is in customer care and marketing. And we'll double click on some of these in a little bit. How do you sell and service customers And this could be on handling, incoming calls, incoming chats from customers, or it could be augmenting agents who are for handling those calls on one side, or it could be on the marketing side. If you think about all the content creation that we talked about, being able to generate text, being able to generate videos, being able to generate images, then how do you apply that in a marketing domain? Um, and we are seeing pipelines where people are now able to go create um, marketing content material on a much accelerated pace. And then comes product design. You can use these abilities um, to more intelligently design these products. And what I mean by that is typically product design in a company fairly long process, and it's a fairly long cycle. Any retail product, if you take, for example, um, it will typically involve 5 to 10 different teams coming together and saying, okay, this is an idea. So you're going from the concept of an idea to validating the value for that idea. And then once you've done that, then it's typically like 5 to 10 different teams coordinating internally on what are the materials I need to use, what are the designs I need for that product, what should be the pricing for that product, how should I go to market with the product, who's my customer base for that product, how am I going to distribute the product. Whole lot of decisioning goes in before you go build out that product. And then once you've done that, then you go into the manufacturing side of it and do that. So all that upfront design typically would be all these teams trying to do this in a semi-coordinated basis. And we are seeing LLMs bridging that coordination a lot more. Um, on the retail side, you think about, okay, you've got these products, you've given it to the retailers. I'm talking mostly about consumer goods for now. You put it in retailers that are going to sell to the customers. There again, you're seeing AI and generative AI assist the retailers in a large fashion. And then some of these have existed before, which is through traditional machine learning. You'd use route optimization or inventory optimizations, stock optimization, all leveraged through traditional machine learning. And then on top of that, we are leveraging generative AI to say, okay, now how do I make sure that I have compliance on the planogram? Um, I, I go look at a retailer, I look at the shelves, I want to see if the products are stocked the way they're supposed to be stocked. Is the brand marketing, is the retail store doing it on a compliant basis with what my brand marketing should be, and so on. And then from there, we go into operations, which is if you take all the different back office functions that need to happen in order to manufacture and sell the products. It could be on the supply chain side, or it could be on the procurement side, or just the talent HR coordination side. There are a series of co-pilots and assistants that can help, right? You have questions on how my contract should be set up with my retailer or my customer. Um, then we see procurement assistants popping up there, helping procurement analysts answer those questions. Or I have to go and, as an employee of an organization, I want to be able to understand all the different policies that I have. What are the benefits that I have? How do I go and promote an employee? How do I handle a difficult conversation with an employee? These are all questions that come up all the time within a company, and you'd have typically have a team of trained HR professionals uh, to answer these questions. But at some point, that the volumes um, become fairly unmanageable, and so these assistants and co-pilots then serve as a first layer to address a lot of those questions before handing it out to the HR professionals within the company. And then finally, within the IT arena itself, every company, every enterprise has their own IT organization, and they have to build their applications, they have to maintain their data centers, they have to they have to build, maintain, they build, test, maintain, operate a series of different platforms and applications. All of that requires um, extensive development tasks. So again, LLMs are entering into the picture to help automate a lot of these. I'll pause here. I know I went on for a while here. I'll pause here. Any questions so far? Okay. Great.
If any questions, they can put in the chat box. Okay. Participants, please put any questions in the chat box too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think by now it would have been clear that the promise of AI and automation in the enterprise, it's not locked to just one specific arena. It's pretty much across the board, and we're pretty much on the cusp of it. It's something that's starting to happen over the last 2 years, but we're literally at the inflection point of a hockey stick, where this is just going to grow exponentially. Having said all of that, doing this in an enterprise setting is fairly different from doing this for a consumer setting. In an enterprise setting, there are some requirements every enterprise has in order to be compliant with regulatory agencies, in order to ensure that they are protected from copyright, IP infringement, or from legal lawsuits, etc. So then the question becomes, okay, how do we take this and do it in an enterprise-ready fashion? And typically that boils down to 4 themes or pillars. The IBM point of view, at least, is that whenever we go and do these for enterprises or clients, it's based on these 4 pillars. So number 1 is that whatever we do is open, meaning we leverage whatever is the best of the technologies out there. It could be a closed source model, it could be an open source model, it could be a combination of those. At the end of the day, the enterprise has full visibility into what models are selected, why they're selected, and how they are being leveraged as the backend of an application to make certain decisions or to inform them in those processes. And so that is that open pillar. Typically, the way the industry is going is to make sure that there is a very good collaboration with the open source community. The open source community, to its credit, has been advancing a lot of these models fairly robustly and catching up with the closed source models, right? And so take the best of what is out there in the community, and then figure out what makes sense for an enterprise to build, which is meeting their infosec requirements, which is meeting their regulatory requirements. Number 2 is targeted, meaning you can take these models and make them very domain specific. What that means is that you can have a foundation model that you're going to use for protein structure prediction may not be the one that you want to use for customer servicing. So there is some domain specificity that's involved in terms of how that model is built, what sort of industry or what sort of process it's tuned against. Take those models and leverage those. The third pillar or the theme is what we call as trusted, meaning whether it's traditional machine learning or automation or generative AI, whatever it is, you have a full glass pane, meaning you have a full visibility into the decisioning that happens as part of that workflow. And so you have a complex workflow where you're leveraging a traditional machine learning model to go come up with recommendations on how to score particular customers for loan applications, let's say, then something like that needs to have full explainability of how that model is being able to score those customers, on what features is it trained on, why it's scoring certain customers higher versus lower. That 100% visibility make sure that everyone is comfortable with the recommendations that the model is giving. And that leads us to empowered, which is, I view it in two terms. One, you always want to have a human in the loop. The model is not making a decision by itself. It's making recommendations. It's augmenting the the humans in the process, and it's guiding them towards what decisions to make, but stop short of making the ultimate decision itself. So at the end of the day, the human still holds the the key in terms of what the decision has to be made, which they can arrive at through a combination of factors, right? Based on the model's recommendation, based on their know-how, based on whatever factors that they see on the ground, etc. They combine all of that and then come to a decision. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is um, from a purely technological or technical vantage point, how should these models be operating, or where should they be hosted? The short answer to that is run it wherever it makes sense for you as an enterprise. Some enterprises may say, I want to do it on-prem. Some enterprises may say, no, I want to do it in a particular cloud, or I want to use multi-cloud. I want to use cloud one plus cloud two. Whatever it is, your platform, your application should be able to do all of those. Those models should be able to meet all of those possibilities. Whether you want to run it open source, and whether you want to run it on-prem completely within your Fort Knox firewall, so you're fully guaranteed for your highest data classifications, that you don't want any data to leave your network at all, then you have the capability to do it. Or for lower data classifications, you're fine doing it in one cloud or multiple clouds, then again you're able to do it. So those are the four common pillars that we typically see and we advocate. Enterprises do it when they are building these LLM based applications, generative AI applications at scale. And so just double clicking on that, what we typically talk about as trustworthiness of AI models, that breaks into three pieces. It is accountability, transparency, and explainability. And this is something I mentioned a little earlier as well. This is a combination of how the model is performing and how the organization is equipped as well. So this is broadly what we would call as AI governance. Every enterprise, when they're doing this at scale, they need to have a governance model. And that governance model typically involves this first bucket, which is a series of decisions need to be taken from the higher level to the actual developer level. Um, there is a series of responsibilities at each of those levels. And there is a framing of policies that need to happen for an enterprise. What sort of models are you comfortable with? Where should the models be hosted? If you want to host them in multiple different locations or multiple different clouds, then under what conditions you want to do it? Who should be approved to use these models? How should they be able to access these models? And what sort of tools and capabilities should you build or buy in order for that access to be enabled? There are these series of decisions and series of governance policies that need to be put in place for an enterprise to be truly ready to operate at scale. Um, and so that is this whole accountability factor that comes in when you're doing trustworthy AI at scale. The And that includes typically what we see in the organizations is everyone gets excited with generative AI. I want to play with it. I want to do something cool with it. But there needs to be a value prioritization. Yes, I've got a use case. Is it is it providing value to the company? Is it impacting the cost of operations by a big magnitude, or is it bringing big revenue um, um, big revenue upcharge, whatever it is, quantify that, and that helps a central AI governance committee make decisions on, yes, these are the 3 or 5 strategic buckets where I want to focus on. And once you've figured out those strategic areas, then there is a volley of use cases that you can go and build against them. And then there is a prioritization exercise that the committee typically goes through, evaluating against the governance policies that the company has put in place, checks them against it, and says, okay, now we are ready to go and operationalize this, right? So it's it's um it's fairly different from, yes, I have a model and I'm going to go build with it. Within an enterprise, there is a whole governance structure that typically emerges when you try to operationalize this at production scale. The second area is the transparency side of things, which is both from a model perspective as well as from a developer perspective. From a developer perspective, there needs to be absolute clarity on, both from developers and business side, there needs to be absolute clarity on all the different features. Are you thinking through? Are there areas that you're not, um, that you don't have full control when you're providing a data set, training data set to the model for it to make evaluations or recommendations? And on the flip side, when you're building these systems, leveraging these models, both traditional machine learning as well as Gen AI models, from a development perspective, there needs to be mechanisms to make sure that you have um, the capability to answer questions fairly transparently, right? And that very closely ties in with the explainability piece, which I talked about, which is when you're answering a question, you always break down into how you came up with that explanation. And so if you're trained on 15 different features for evaluating a loan application, and someone asks the question, okay, here is a customer evaluated, then I expect the system to say, okay, here are the 15 features that I was trained on. I tested this customer against these 15 features. Here's how they are scored against. And this is the rule or logic that the business has provided in order to score the customers based on these 15 features. Out of these 15 features, these 3 should be weighted this much, these 5 should be weighted lower. And so based on that, here's how I'm arriving at evaluating this customer. Now, that's just a simplistic example, but that hopefully illustrates the point that there needs to be that level of explainability for humans to be able to make those decisions. Right? So now I'm going to go into how all of this translates into customer servicing and marketing. Like I mentioned earlier already, when multiple agencies, organizations have surveyed enterprises, there is no other single organization which is primed for generative AI more than customer service. It is it is one of the most mature organizations where a lot of AI already exists. And so it's becoming an easy area to increase the application of generative AI. Last year, this became a big, new statement, groundbreaking statement. There was this company called Klarna, which is like a fintech slash retail type of a company. What they mentioned was, we have applied generative AI. We are handling 2/3 of the customer service chats, and we have basically automated the capabilities of 700 call center agents. It was a bold statement, and it heralded how the industry overall was starting to wake up to the reality of generative AI. Now, this has existed for a while, right? So the traditional conversational AI and some of the generative AI areas had existed. IBM included had done this for some of the enterprises, and some enterprises had um, seen results to this extent where, for example, one of my clients, they're handling 40 million odd interactions, and over the course of 3-4 years they were able to handle or contain close to 60-70% of those interactions without hitting an agent. And so there is a lot that had been built on the conversational AI chatbots that had existed in the past. And now with generative AI, it truly transforms it to take it to another level. And so what this means when we look at it within an enterprise, the enterprises typically look at this from three lenses, or at least we tell the enterprises to look at it from three lenses: the strategy, people side of it, and experimentation. I'll go through each of these fairly quickly. From a strategy perspective, yeah, these are some statistics, right? When we, the Institute for Business Value, which is the research wing for IBM, goes and surveys CEOs of enterprises, customer service is truly number one of their Gen AI priority. If you ask them which is the biggest area where you would apply Gen AI, customer service typically comes to the top. And they see a couple of big impact areas. One is the overall customer experience of the CSAT itself, that they see a huge potential of deploying generative AI and then impacting that. And then number two is optimizing the operations of that customer servicing function, right? Both of those, so you serve customers better, but much more efficiently. And so in order to let that happen, how do you do it? Three things, right? One, take a look at, if you look at the operation side of it, you'll need to look at the human agents who are servicing these call centers. And if you've been in a call center before, you'll see it is it's a it's a fairly challenging task in a regular call center without any automation on AI. A call comes in or a volley of calls come in, a call center agent is handling the call. They are seated in front of 2 or 3 different screens, and they're looking at 10 different applications that are open. They are understanding what the customer is asking. They'll manually stitch together information points. They'll look at an order information. They'll look at a customer information database. They'll go look at a policy document. They'll go do some other manual calculation. They have to stitch together all of these and then come back and respond to a customer while ensuring that the customer is not getting upset because it's taking time to do all of this. And so the key here is, how do you augment those agents, give them these tools in order to make that process really, really seamless for them. Right?
Dr. Ambhi, sorry to
Yep.
interrupt. There are a
Yep.
couple of questions in the chat. I will
Sure.
read it.
Yeah, for
One
sure.
is what is LLM, sir? A second question is how does AI-powered customer service improve customer experience?
Yep. Yep. Um, Apologies, I should have probably explained LLM. So LLMs are large language models. I'm going to really quickly go back here.
Yeah, that was a little old question. I just now observed and read it.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So LLMs are what we call as large language models. The the AI models that existed before were, what we would call as machine learning models. They're trained on structured data, and then you have a database of information. Say you have, customer IDs, order amounts, and the dates that they purchased, etc. You can train a statistical model to come up with that and say, okay, predict when a customer is going to make another order if there is a pattern against it. That is a fairly structured model. From there, we went to NLP models, right? So these natural language processing models are not looking at structured data, but they're looking at unstructured text. So you have a fairly long document. You need to be able to take those documents, those streams of text, and then make sense out of it and do a variety of tasks on top of it. I need to be able to identify certain entities, right? I want to be able to see if there is a financial report, for example, for a company. Then I want to be able to identify every mention of the company's name, or I want to be able to identify every mention of a product's name, right? You could manually go and do it, or you're going to use these NLP models to go do that. These and those are all, either a combination of ML models and or what we call as deep learning models, which is, think of these as neural networks that that are being trained for these specific tasks. Those neural networks then grew in size, grew in size, grew in size, and basically became humongous models with billions and billions of parameters. Previously we would have had it at a few million parameters, if that's the case, right? But we've reached the stage where we are now at billions and billions of parameters, being able to process this text at scale, generate text at scale. Those are what are called as large language models. Hopefully that explained.
Yes, yes. Okay, sir. That was the reply from the question who asked.
What's the second question, Rajesh?
Second question was, how does AI-powered customer service improve customer experience?
Got it. Okay. So I'm coming to that in a second. I think that's a good segue to all of this, right? If we do all of this, right, I'm talking about optimizing the operations, and I'll get to a bit on how it improves the experience. The operation side of it, you can set up all these AI tools to give agents the ability to answer questions faster, etc. Right? Let me just jump in here. From an experience perspective, there are a few different ways here. You optimize the engagement with the customers. Typically, you would have seen chatbots being fairly rigid and structured. And let's say you have an example of I need to, I need to make a return. Then it would ask a fairly structured set of questions, and you may have seen these in a lot of different settings, right? You may have personally dealt with chatbots too. They all used to be very, very rigid and structured. Hi, how can I help you? What is your order ID? Okay, if I don't have my order ID, then how will I find out, right? Or it may ask, okay, what's the product that you placed? When did you place it? Where did you buy it? There's 10 different questions it's going to ask. By the time it gets to it, you're exhausted. It's not a great experience for you. With generative AI and with the right stitching of data, a lot of that can be truly transformed, right? You come in and say, where is my order? Now, if you logged in into the portal, then I should know in the backend that it's you as a customer. It's Ambhi who's logged in, and I have Ambhi's data. So I've already authenticated. It's Ambhi who's logged in. In the backend, I should be able to go pull up all the information that Ambhi has done, what all orders he placed, what products he bought, when he bought it, what amount he bought it, where he bought it. Every single piece of information should be registered. Then I should not be asking. I should rather be proactively as a chatbot, virtual assistant. I should be asking, okay, I see that you placed the order for this particular product 3 days ago. Are you trying to return that product? Right? You're making an educated guess that they're coming here for a recent purchase, that they're not coming here for something that happened 6 months ago. And so you do those types of experience changes, right? You proactively ask those questions. You don't give them, you don't make it a form filling exercise. You don't make it give me 10 pieces of information and then I'll go figure out. Rather, you use the data at hand to automatically figure out what is it that they're trying to ask about, and then say, okay, here's what I can do for you. In this particular case, if I had come and said, I want to make a return, and I say, okay, is this for the purchase that you did 2 days ago? And I say, yes. And if in the backend, the system is able to go and initiate a return on my behalf, then that's pretty much it, right? I've gone from an experience that would have taken me 20 questions to literally 2 questions. That, in a nutshell, is how the experience is changing, if that helps.
Yeah, there is another perspective for this question.
Sure.
I mean, what I understood is apart, I mean, how this AI-powered customer service is better than the conventional customer service. I think that might be the question that participant asking. Maybe the other perspective. Maybe you can tell that.
Yeah, so the conventional customer service, you have 3 layers of customer service, right? You can, let me see if I can get to that. So typically, if a customer comes in, now, a lot of cases, the customer would have come in and they would have called and they would have talked to a human agent. Like that's the customer service a lot of us are accustomed to. I'll just pick up a phone, I'll call someone. Now, there are a few different approaches that you are enhancing this. One, the channels, right? You expand the number of channels that they can contact through. So it's not just phone, you enable it through chat, SMS, email, WhatsApp, whatever it is, right? That's number one. Not a generative AI statement, but that is just purely how customer service is evolving. Number two is rather than talk to the customer service, I'll now have a generative AI virtual assistant doing all of this upfront. So that experience that I was talking about, rather than having, a customer taking an agent taking my call and then looking up at 10 screens and placing me on hold for 5 minutes to go look up information, I'll have the virtual assistant go look up the data proactively on my behalf and then come back with a response here, right? So the stitching of the data is, think of that as already having pre-built and already happened. And so the virtual agent is now able to take a look at the, if it's Ambhi, then for Ambhi, here is the set of orders, here is the set of amounts that he paid, where he bought it, when he bought it, etc. Doesn't have to look at 10 different systems or screens in order to come to that. Once having all of that stitched data together, then it comes back to a response. And so this piece becomes critical as well. So when we set up these generative AI applications, what goes hand in hand is the capability to have the data really stitched together. Otherwise, again, you run the risk of even a virtual agent going and trying to piece together information from 10 different systems, right? So the true differentiator here is not just the generative AI virtual assistants. It's in tandem working with a full set of data that's completely stitched together. Did it help?
I guess so. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
It's clear. It's clear. Yeah.
Because they are not responding. I think they asked the question.
Okay. Yeah.
I
Feel
think
free
it
to
is.
ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. That's a thumbs up there. Yeah.
Okay. And so maybe I should have, used this screen. So this is another example of how these conversational AI responses are evolving, right? So if you look at the extreme left, this is what we've typically done in the past. So someone says, can I use my points on an airline? Then, you would look at how many points you had, and then you'll say, okay, here is the policy. Now go look it up. You go figure out how you want to use it. So there is still a burden on the user. yes, I've gotten some information, I've given you some information, but a lot of the decision making burden is still on the user, and it's a fairly structured dialogue. Um, you've given that. Now, from there, we are going towards being able to not just look up that data point, but also bring in some of the policy information, help in the decision making process, right? So now I'm going and looking at the policies and I'm saying, okay, can this person actually use points on the airfare or not? And so within the policy document, there is a blurb on whether you can do it or not, what is the impact of it. And so the LLM or the generative AI solution then goes back into the policy document, retrieves the appropriate policy, and then comes back with it, right? The, the future extension to this, as we are going more advanced, is that you not only fetch the data, you go look at policies and you ground it in policy information or standard operating procedures. You come up with personalized recommendations as well, right? So in this case, someone is asking, okay, what credit card should I be considering? You'll go take a look at the customer's profile. You'll go take a look at a recommender system and seeing what are the options that are available to them, what are the potential options, and layer on a generative AI element on top of it, ground it with the ML model provide information, and give a neatly composed response to the user. And so in the past, each of these would have been a disjoint system, right? You asked a question like this, a virtual assistant or an agent would have said, yes, here are the number of points you have. Fine, I'll give you that information. And then, if you would have had to ask a follow-up question, well, okay, but what's your policy really? Then someone has to go look at the policy document. A human agent may have said, okay, I'm going to put you on hold 5 minutes. I'll go find which is the policy document for you. Let me go find it in the 10 different systems I have these policies, and I'll go pull up your policy. I'll read through it, and then I'll give you a response and hold for 5 minutes, right? Now we've gotten to a case where all of these is happening in a really accelerated pace with the generative AI system. And you're able to drive more upsell, cross-sell. In the past, these recommendation models would have operated on their own. And so the enterprise would have these machine learning models, beautifully built ML models that are figuring out what sort of products should be sold to particular customers, but didn't have a mechanism to inject it as part of um, a servicing request, right? It would have typically been an email that just comes up front, and you have no context for it. You're like, why am I getting this? But now you have an interaction mechanism where a customer has walked in and they are asking you, there is a servicing that is happening. As part of the servicing, now you have the capability to bring in the ML model output, compose it with natural language, and seamlessly plug it into the conversation. And therefore, you have a cross-sell upsell mechanism happening, right? So that's how the overall experience is evolving through generative AI. I want to flip to the marketing side of it. Marketing is another big area where we are seeing generative AI explode. If you talk to the chief marketing officers of the major operation, they're all again very, very bullish on the promise of generative AI in accelerating their marketing content generation pipelines, in being able to take it to the customers. And this spans multiple different domains. So content creation is a big one, which is what I mean by content creation is every single enterprise will have a pipeline. You're getting all these marketing emails. Now that marketing email someone has to copyright it. Someone has to come up with all the clever words and the content, the the catchy statements and all of that. Someone has to come up with it, and there has to be catchy images that go along with it. And if you want to create a really personalized experience, then you would have micro segments of customers or segments of customers and say, okay, there are customers that are millennials, and for them, I'm going to send this, this copy, this marketing email. For my Gen X, then I'm going to send this particular type of email. Someone has to do that manually, right? A lot of that is getting automated and accelerated through generative AI. Um, the the other side of it is the insights portion of it, which is typically every marketing team is on the back end looking at all the customer interactions, your digital presence or your retail presence. You combine all of that information. You're looking at the vast amounts of data that are available and trying to understand um, what sort of customer segments exist, what are they buying, how are their buying patterns changing over time, are there new leads that we can go acquire, where can I go find the new leads, and if I'm spending on marketing media, then what is the effectiveness of my marketing campaign? Is there a way to optimize the spend of my campaign in order to achieve better effectiveness of the marketing that I'm driving? And so that's another huge area where generative AI is starting to impact as well. And broadly, it falls into these four buckets, right? When you use generative AI, it's you can use it to hyper personalize the content. So again, going back to the example of marketing emails that you may get for say a shoe product, right? Typically, previously it would have been a segment, all millennials or all millennials who live in a particular place, or all millennials in a particular age bracket and having two kids, etc. Now you truly have the mechanism, because you have data at an individual level or a series of individual levels, really micro segments. You can get to a personalization at the level of those micro segments rather than broad segments. Social channels, lots and lots of social activity that happens on the major social media platforms. The amount of signals that are being generated, that is huge, but is not fully captured or exploited enough to be able to inform what the marketing campaign should be. But now with Gen AI, again, you can read through all those posts and messages on an accelerated basis, capture all those signals really, really effectively, and you collapse it. And then now you're guided towards how you want to market your products effectively. And then, the hand in hand going with that is the customer insight or the brand sentiment, right? How is the customer perceiving a product, or how is the brand being perceived? You get all of these signals from their online presence, from the social media presence, etc. So an example, for example, this is something that we within IBM we did a couple of years back. Adobe came up with this model, text to image generation model called Firefly. Um, and we said, okay, what if we ran a marketing campaign rather than have an agency, marketing agency, go create net new images, have someone hand design what the content should be. What if we used Firefly to create some of this content, and we'll use that to go rapidly test out what works and what doesn't work? And so it hugely accelerated the pipeline, right? You can come up with 1,000+ assets in less than a day, right? You can rapidly experiment coming up with a series of these assets meaning all these images in this case. You can churn through them on a very fast basis. And then you do that, you can very quickly run some A/B tests and then check out how they are doing. the outcome here was that very, very successful campaign that happened as an outcome of this, right? High interest responses, high engagement, um, lots of leads acquired as part of that. Another example, IBM as a company also works with the Masters tournament, which is a big golf tournament that happens in the US. And one of the things that happens is, if you think about it from a fan experience or a user experience, when fans are watching these clips, typically what would happen is that a game happens, a match happens, and it takes a while before all the content around that needs to be created and can be posted on the app or the website. You'll need to create commentary about what is happening in a particular clip. You'll need to create a description for that clip, all of that. Now, with these generative AI models, that gets done fairly quickly. Right? I'm going to just play an example here. Let's see if this works.
Roy is on his third shot and is playing completely. He took his third shot from the green side bunker, and the ball has 17 feet to the pin.
So this is a generated commentary, right? We take this clip, we take sensor data associated with this clip, and we feed it all into the system. And in the backend, it comes up with this commentary. So when it says, McIlroy is on his third shot, it has the relevant data. It has the information that's presented as part of this clip, and it's able to come up with this coherent sentence with the necessary information points, right? The third shot, or the ball has 17 feet to the pin, etc. All of that inputs have come together. It has made a coherent commentary, and we are not just synthesizing the text, then we are converting the text into audio and then creating a commentary out of it. And so what ended up happening was, when we did this a couple of years back, instead of waiting for a day to upload the clips, we could now go ahead and upload the clips in less than an hour, because you have a system where the video is available. At runtime, we are calling the system, and the model is able to generate this commentary. It's ready now, vetted, and now you can go and post it onto the website. So much, much richer experience, faster experience for the fans to be able to consume it. So I'll end with a broad statement in terms of where enterprises are, how enterprises are approaching this. The patterns that I've seen is typically, lots of fantastic use cases, and there's no dearth of use cases here, whether it's customer servicing, marketing, operations, supply chain, procurement, etc. Right? But the really successful clients who are doing this at scale, they're doing three things. One, there is a high-level strategy in place, which is at a senior leadership level. There is a conscious choice on, these are the 3-5 big areas that I want to focus on, where I want to apply AI. Number two is, I equip the organization to build those applications through platforms and architecture enablers. So you have reusable components, you have templates, you have patterns, platforms, all of those are ready. So your IT organization is equipped to go build these applications at scale. And then finally, right, everyone has interest, everyone wants to build a use case. There is a conscious choice on, okay, I'll prioritize these high value use cases, even within those high priority areas, but I'm rapidly iterating. So it's not I'll build something, maybe it'll work, maybe it'll not work, but it's a conscious, okay, I'll build, I'll iterate. If it fails, then I'll quickly pivot, and then I'll ship something else, using all these reusable components that have been built in a platform. that's the pattern that we are seeing. And again, lots of promise where we see the industry evolving, going back to agents. I think the year of 2025 is going to be what you would call as the year of agents. I think we're going to see big changes in terms of how LLM models are going to maximize their quote unquote reasoning or planning capabilities. And once you breach that barrier of being able to plan at scale for complex use cases fairly repeatedly in a uniform fashion, then that solves a lot of enterprise use cases. So I'll stop there. I wanted to leave like 10 minutes for any questions. Nalin, you may be on mute, by the way.
Any questions?
Dear participants, yeah, any questions?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have few viewpoints, Ambhi. Like
Sure.
it seems that business or transformation, and it's happening, and they're coming at as a customer. I'm feeling very vulnerable now. I'm feeling like I'm standing naked there because they know whatever before even I take a call, say they know from where I'm calling. They have all my data. Okay, so I'm being very vulnerable because the purpose of the organization, of course, it's to serve me. That is first thing. Yeah, they're serving, but at what premium?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the business wants to make profit.
Yeah.
Right. And if all these tools and generative AI are helping one person, how it's going to help me? Because why I'm saying is this, because many of the businesses you always know, whether it's a telecom business or whether it's a credit card business, whether it's an airline business, they all have a fine print. As a single customer, I cannot address that. I will not be able to find the time to understand what are those fine prints. So in many cases, it might happen that we feel we got exploited. And especially after this automation kind of thing, now we are not able to address this to the company itself because we are not able to find because of the automation, the bot says that something and it ends there. Sorry, we are not able to do that. So there is no escalation part coming up. There is no addressing part coming up that. So when you try to say with normal chatbot, a single app itself is like that. But when generative AI comes and I feel the enterprise is getting very strengthened, but as a customer, I'm feeling very weak.
Yeah. So
I'm feeling very poor. I'm saying, how do you address this?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there, very valid statements, right? The first one is privacy rules and regulations. So, and there are some markets, there are some countries, some states that have fairly stringent policies in what types of data you can collect, how you can process it, where you can process it. Europe is very strict in terms of it. California is very strict in terms of it, right? I think the first piece is even before you get there, it's a data question. And this data question has existed for a while, right? The governments have to consciously bake in the right set of privacy guidelines, and enterprises will comply with the privacy guidelines. It's at the end of the day, it's giving you, the customer, the choice, right? In Europe, for example, or in a lot of the other places, customer can go and ask for their data to be deleted, right? And they mandate that, I want that mechanism to be in an easy manner. It's not just paying lip service, but it's a mechanism that I want to be easy, that, it's a free choice for everyone. And if you want to be served that way, then fine. If you don't want to be served, then that's fine. But give the choice to the people and make it an equally viable, easy process. So I think it starts from that. It starts from the policy side, first of all. There definitely needs to be a lot of education at a consumer level on what the policies are, what privacy regulations exist, don't exist, where the gaps are, etc. Right? And I think once that comes into place, then everything else
There
will
will be
fall
a
into place.
lot of time lag for that. That's what I'm feeling actually, because to come the policies, if it has to come,
Yeah.
that means it has to be implemented. Everyone has to experience it. Then only the policies come. And the rate at which this technology is taking away, and you want policies to be in place, it's never going to catch up.
The
I'm telling
other
you, I
piece
I can even the Gen A will be designed in such a way that I'm telling you, it's going to adapt in such a way that it's going to outsmart the policy making or policy implementing.
Yeah, the other piece here is that you only expose the data to a system. What would be exposed to a human, right? Today, if you're calling a customer service agent, that customer service agent has literally the same data available to them. They are saying, okay, I know Nalin, I know Ambhi, here is the order that they place, because I'm calling and saying, hey, I want to make a return, right? If I choose to say delete all my data, then the only option for me is I go to the store and I say, here is my receipt, and now I want to return this, right? But if I want to have the flexibility of calling into the customer service and an agent picks up and says, yes, I see you on the system, you make sure that it's data parity, right? What data you give to that customer servicing agent,
That's what I'm saying.
only that you give to the system, right? Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less, right? Then you're just, again, at the end of the day, always ensure that you have a human in the loop. Then this is something that I say, even when you're building chatbots, right? Always have an escalation mechanism. Never make it abruptly ending. You always have an option to talk to a human at any point in time. If you make sure that is the case, that escalation path always exists, right? And that's how it should be designed. So you always have a human in the loop.
It's yeah. We can. I think it's a similar kind of question is in the chat box. It says like, how can we ensure that AI-powered customer service is fair and unbiased in its decision making?
Yeah. So Kiran, I think that goes back to some of those points that I was mentioning, right? If you ensure that one, the data availability to the Gen AI system is on parity with what you give to the customer servicing agent, number one. Number two is the rules and guidelines are something that we provide to the system, right? So when we train the system, we are training the system not just on going and looking up the data, but also what the process has to be. And so it's the onus is on us on how we go and train that system. And when we train that system, we have to ensure that, going back to my explainability angle, right? When a chatbot or a virtual agent is saying, I, that example of, are my points, can I use my airline points to make a purchase? That is a policy, right? You don't want Gen AI to quote unquote hallucinate and come up with, some random textual information. You mandate that it always gives a link to the source document and point to where it comes from. So that means it's 100% verifiable. So yes, it has done the work of retrieving the information, but you can always go and validate it, verify it. So putting guardrails like that is very, very important. And I see enterprises put a lot of effort actually in ensuring guardrails actually exist in place. They think 10 times before making sure that, like one of my clients, we built a platform, a Gen AI platform, and anything that goes in, anything that comes out is heavily scrutinized by a system that looks for, content safety, hate, abuse, right? All of these, there is a system of checks that it goes and measures against and says, okay, this is not a abusive language, or this is not a biased language. So those systems exist. You guard before it goes in, and then you guard before it comes out, before you send it to a customer.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, that's good. So there is another question is there. Which ERP package mostly adaptable used by IBM or industry implement Gen AI models?
Yeah, the short answer is that it's completely varies by different client, right? There are clients that will use SAP, Oracle. There will be a mixture of different systems that they'll use. There'll be Salesforce as a CRM, Siebel as a CRM. Yeah, you'll have different call center, servicing systems, SAP as an ERP, Oracle as an ERP, any and all of those. So the enterprise complexity really depends on which company it is.
Good. Any more questions? Yeah, I think, yeah.
And that's it.
I think we reached 9. We are started on time and we are ending on time. Thanks, Ambhi.
Yes.
Right. Again, thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
Ambhi. So thanks. It was very, very.
Thank you, Dr. Ambhi. Very informative and given a different perspective of Gen AI with respect to customer service. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And thank you for having me as a part of this. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
you.
Good luck
Participants,
for sessions.
Yeah, Ambhi participants will be providing a feedback. I will share it with you. Okay.
Okay,
Once I
sounds
receive
good.
it, I will share it with you. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
So
All right.
participants, please fill the feedback form in the same link. Okay. Yeah. So you all have a good night. So tomorrow is the final day. So we'll be having a 1-hour test. So please prepare for that. Okay. Good luck, everyone. Thank you,
Okay.
Ambhi. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Yeah.
I think it's half an hour test, right? Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, last hour means what I mean to say is that last hour. Yeah. That is the final hour, not 1-hour test. Yeah. Got it. I think we can stop the video.
Recording and meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sir. Good night then. See you tomorrow.
Good night. Yeah. See you tomorrow.